The end of the story, The Animal Family, Chapter 7, The Boy, Part 2. Remember when I wanted to pick up the coal, she said. Those days I'd picked it up and it hadn't burnt me, and I sat there with it in my hands. In the morning, when I'd awake, I'd lie by you and say the new things to myself, and there were so many I couldn't believe I was awake. I say to myself, I'm dreaming. And it was that way so long. But one morning, when I started to think of the new things, there weren't any. And the next morning, there still weren't any. And the next morning, there still weren't. I was used to things. Only it was hard for me to get used to being alone so much. The sea people go in schools like fish. We're never alone. I'd wait for you and push myself across to the window and think how long it would take me to push myself down over the meadow and the beach to the sea, and then I'd say to myself, never since the world began has one of the sea people been here where I am. But that just meant that they'd been wrong and I was right, I'd tell myself, and I believed it. Only it was hard for me to believe it. And it was hard when I went back to them. They were so sorry for me. Here the mermaid frowningly repeated some words and went on. That means, the one who lives with the animals. That's what they called me, the one who lives with the animals. The sea people don't know what a pet is. They couldn't understand why I wanted to live with animals, and land animals at that. And they don't know you or what you're like. To them, you're a big animal from the land, and dangerous. You're not a man. When I went back to them, they were always so sure that this time I would stay. And sometimes, after I'd been with them a day or two, where everything's so easy and the way it's always been, it was hard for me to believe that I was coming back to you. Sometimes it would seem to me that you and the house and the bed and the table were a dream I'd had, and now I was awake. To get back to you, I'd have to go asleep again and dream the same dream. I remember I used to dream as a little child that I lived on a ship and had legs, and I told my mother, and she shook her head and said, everything good comes from the sea. But not for me, the mermaid said passionately, because the land is different. Sometimes the sea's rough, sometimes it's calm, but down underneath, it's always just the same. And life's like that there. Once, when I'd lived with you for years and years, I'd gone back to them, and the second day was the same as the first, and the third day was the same as the second. And I began to feel so queer inside that I wanted something. I was like being hungry, only I wasn't hungry. And then I knew how you feel when it rains, and there's nothing for you to do. I know, but none of them knew. They don't know how to be bored or miserable. One day is one wave, and the next day the next. For the sea people, whether they're glad or whether they're sorry, the sea washes it away. When my sister died, the next day I'd forgotten and was happy. But if he died, my heart would break. When it storms for the people, no matter how terribly it storms, the storm isn't real. Swim down a few strokes and it's calm down there. Down there it's always calm. And death is no different. If it's someone else who dies, we say, swim away from it. And we swim away from everything. But on land, it's different. The storm's real here, and the red leaves and the branches when they're bare all winter. It all changes and never stops changing. I'm here with nowhere to swim to, nowhere to leave it or forget it. No, the land is better. The land is better. The hunter stroked her shoulder and said in a serious, thankful voice, I'm glad it's better for you. He had learned something he had never known before. The mermaid could cry. But the meadow was no different for the mermaid's tears or the hunter's knowledge. Warm and soft and smelling of its flowers, it ran out, green to the sunny beach, green to the shadowy forest, and the hunter and the mermaid sat there in it. Below them, the white on green of the waves was lined along the white shore. Out beyond, the green sea got bluer and bluer, till at last it came to the far-off blue of the island. There were small seals on the seal rocks, and the little gray spot out above the waves was a big black and white osprey waiting for a fish. But no fish came, and it hung there motionless. Everything lay underneath them like something made for them. Things got smaller and smaller in the distance, but managed somehow to still fill the whole world. I'll carry you, said the hunter, getting up. And he went on with the mermaid in his arms. When he got to their door, he went inside and put her down. They turned and looked at it all again. Then they opened the door and went into the house. You were gone so long, the boy said. Look at the shells I brought you, said the hunter, holding them out. The boy went through them carefully. They were too good enough to save. He put those with his own shells and then went over them all one by one. Then he said to the mermaid, the big one you brought me, it's still the best. The one from the bottom of the sea. These are good ones too, but the big one is still the best. Yes, it's the reddest, the mermaid answered. Down there it was all wet and purple, but up here it's red. She smiled at the hunter, as red as the red leaves, as red as a coal in the fire. The boy asked, can I get up now? In a little, said the mermaid, and because you were so good and stayed in your bed all the time we were gone, I'll tell you a story. The boy laughed with joy. There was nothing he liked better than the mermaid's stories. She sat down by him on the bed, and he moved over against her. Once upon a time, she began, long, long ago, there was a mermaid. Like you? No, not like me, a little one. One so young and so small, she could still swim through the little round windows in a ship. Remember the little round windows I showed you in the ship out past the seal rocks on the reef? Where we got the lantern? Well, all one night and the next day and the next night, there was a great storm. The little mermaid and her people, instead of playing and fishing and looking for things by the rocks along the shore, swam a long way out to sea, where they could float far down under the waves. It's always still down there, or else when they came to the top, the waves couldn't hurt them, but would rock them way up and then way down, the way I would rock you, the way you'd rock if I put you in the biggest branch of all, when a tremendous wind is blowing, and the branch goes way up in the air, and then bends back down so low it scrapes against the ground. But finally the storm was over, and the sea people swam back to the shore. The sea was all fresh and blue and shining, and the sky was as blue as the sea. When they got to the surf, the breakers crashed down around them and flung foam up over them, and they were as white as the snow when it's fallen in the night. And at morning you go to the window and look, and you still see there isn't a track